Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Daniel Tolson live stream. Today on our show, we have Christine Innes. She's the creator of the Corporate Escape Artist, and today she's going to show you how to escape the 9 to 5 grind. Christine, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
My pleasure. This is a hot topic. I read the book, The 4-Hour Work Week, in 2009, and I was done. But I had no idea what I was in for.
Yes.
So what makes people hate the 9 to 5? What don't they like about it?
I think there's a number of different things that they sort of get to a point in their life. That they've followed somebody else's direction and they've realized that it's not where they've wanted to go. And the other point is that, they're not passionate about where they're at. So they want to actually, find something that they're passionate about so that they can be lit up and inspired every single day, but also too, to actually take some control back of their life.
Have you been in a situation where you've been stuck in the grind and you had to get out?
Yeah, absolutely. I did it for 20 years working in the corporate world. And, part of my story is that I had a not so gracious exit from the corporate world, but I had got quite sick a couple of years ago. And that really was the sort of forcing me to stop work. And then obviously there was a whole heap of other events that started to unfold from there. That really was the turning point for me to realize that is not where I'm meant to be, that I have something else inside of me that I need to follow and I need to pursue.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're joining us live, I'd like to know, are you self-employed or do you work a 9 to 5? Either way, I'd like to know, because we want to make sure that you get a lot of value today. I've had 9 to 5s before. I've worked in pawnbroking businesses. I've been cabin crew. I've worked for Emirates Airline, and now I have my own business. And all of them have their own pros and their cons. And Christine's just telling us now she's had a fall from grace in the corporate world. And I have this image of the tarot card, Christine, and the tower, and there you are falling from grace. What did the fall look like, and how hard did you hit when you fell to the bottom?
Oh, I hit hard. It was face first, not gracious, pretty much, dress over your head, just everything could go wrong. And as I said, it started from me, I got sick and then I got told I would never work again. But then from there, I realized that so much of my life was not right. And a lot of that came down to I was in a very toxic, unfixable marriage as well. And then because I had to stop work, I also had to file for bankruptcy as well. And then I ended up sleeping on my parents' couch for 6 months until I could really rebuild my whole life again. So I hit hard and, I've had to rebuild from the ground up.
You mentioned here about the separation here and also the career. Were you using the career to self-medicate? Did you tie yourself down in a job so you could escape the relationship?
Absolutely. I was working 100-hour weeks. I was working. I also had a side hustle as well. So anything I could do to not have to face the realization that what everyone thought was perfect on the outside really wasn't going on right at home.
So ladies and gentlemen, if you're joining us live today or if you're joining us on the replay, I'd like to know, are you self-employed or are you currently employed? And there's some great insights that Christine's going to share with you today about getting out of the 9 to 5. So there you are, your relationship's toxic. How do you work 100 hours a week? How do you do that?
You just do it. It was sort of like, just in motion, constantly going. Because if I had stopped, I'd realized that I would have had to have a good hard look at myself and realize what wasn't working. So I just kept putting the feet in motion and kept running with it. So it was sort of like, the Rolling Stone sort of analogy. Like I was just rolling down the hill and it kept building up speed. But at some point you have to come to a stop.
So when you came to a stop, and Peter, thanks for joining us. Great to see you there. When you came to a stop, you discovered that you had some major health complications. Once you hit rock bottom and stopped, what was the ripple effect after then? What started to catch up with you once you'd actually come to a stop?
I realized that I'd never asked myself a number of different questions. And the biggest one was, what did I want? I really had lived a life based on what was sort of expected from me. And, I realized that different relationships in my life weren't right. It was me not, being true to myself. I'd put on so many masks and labels within myself, and I wasn't showing up as the real person. I'd go to work in my suit pretty much, and you put your makeup on, wear your designer heels, have your designer handbag. But that really was my suit of armor because I was protecting myself from the outside world.
So you came to a stop and then you got out of being employed. You already had your side hustle. What were the steps from getting out of corporate, escaping the 9 to 5 and getting into your own business? What were the steps that you took?
I needed to, first of all, so the first thing I really did was look at myself. So core values were probably one of the key foundations that I needed to look at. So in the corporate world, you have their values, their mission statement. So I needed to actually create something for myself. So I worked out what my values were, what I stood for, and what the mission statement I wanted for my life. And then I went on to create what I wanted as my ideal day. And that really was the starting point for it, because I could actually start to be creative, start to think about what I wanted and not what was expected from me, from society, from, the different, conditioning that we have, growing up, that, you go to school, you either go to university or go get a job, you work until you're retired, and then you have fun. And I said, well, I want more than that in life.
One of our friends from Sydney is joining us, Amanda McCann. She says, absolutely understand, going through the same thing. I have just hit rock bottom. I am now determined to get back up. So what advice could you share with Amanda now that she's hit rock bottom to be able to get out of that funk and to move on really quick? What advice do you have there for her, Christine?
The best thing is to own your story, to own where you've gotten to right now, because it's your story and you're the one that can actually change it right now. So when you own it and you take full responsibility for where you're at to right there and then, you then give yourself back the power to change it. So it's almost like you've got all these blank pages now in front of you that you can actually go and put into motion of where you want to go. How do you want the next chapter of your life to unfold?
Now, you've been doing a really good job, Christine, of helping people escape the 9 to 5. How many people enjoy their jobs? How many people want to get out? I know I was reading a statistic lately that said 50% of employees were ready to fire their boss. Not the business, but they're ready to fire the boss. So when people come to you, what are the stories that you're hearing and why do they want to leave?
A lot of the times is that they want to, they're either getting ready to have a family or they have a family. So they want to be able to, be there more, be more present in their lives, opposed to, spending an hour or 2 hours every day just traveling to and from work. They want to be able to do something from home. But also too is that they have this, desire within themselves to generally help somebody. So it's getting back to their why they actually want to step outside. But family is probably one of the biggest things that I hear, that, they want to be able to spend time, or they want to create a business now that they can actually build up, so that when they're ready to have a family, it's running well, so that they can actually spend some more time with them.
Well, I can see Amanda appreciates the insights there, and she says, thank you, Christine. Absolutely agree with taking ownership. Now, for those of you who are joining us live or on the replay, my question is, do you like to travel to work? Because I was saying to Christine just offline before, last year when I was in Australia, I'd wake up at 5 a.m. I'd quickly get dressed in the freezing winter cold, 3 jackets on. I'd get to the Penrith train station, jump on the train and go all the way in to Central Station in Sydney. Now, I had to get the early train because if I didn't get the early train, I would catch the next train. I'd have to stand up the whole way. And I didn't really want to stand up on the train. So I'd get to Central, then I'd have to walk 30 minutes away to the meeting. I'd be in a meeting for 90 minutes and come back home. And by the time I'd come back home, it was 2 o'clock and I'd had one meeting for the day, but I had close to 4 hours of travel time and it was only 2 p.m. And I really didn't like it. I had more value, Christine, catching a flight from Taiwan into Sydney, because at least sitting in business class, I could do 8 to 10 hours of work. Now, it's uninterrupted work. It's equal to 24 hours of work on the ground because there's no interruptions. And I'd get there, I can enjoy that. But I'll tell you what, 4 hours a day into the city, back from the city for one meeting was torturous. So,
yeah, absolutely.
ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to know from you is, do you enjoy travelling to or from work or not? I don't. I like to walk from my bedroom to my office, and that's far enough. Sometimes I don't even leave our apartment, and my wife tells me, Daniel, you got to leave the apartment. You have to go for a walk. I say, no, I don't want to.
Yeah.
How many hours were you travelling, and how's that changed for you now, Christine?
It was roughly about an hour to an hour and a half each way to get to work. So, that's, 2 to 3 hours of my day, going to work. And then also, my son was still in high school at that time. So, it was also doing the mum duties as well. So you would, bypass, take him to training, all those different things. So by the time you get home, you have to add on another couple of hours on top of that as well. So, it all adds up. And for me, it was dead time. I was just sort of like, well, what can I do? And the easiest thing I could do was literally call my parents, because I was living interstate, just to sort of use the time wisely. Otherwise, I would be sitting in traffic.
It's true. I like how you've used the word dead time, because when I was on the train, I really couldn't sink myself into the book. It was a little bit too early. My brain was still awake, asleep. I didn't have enough coffee. There was people next to me, and they hold the newspapers this far out, and I'm stuck in the corner because I'm trying to be too polite. It is dead time. And even if you're coming home and you're trying to listen to a podcast or a CD set or some educational material, you can't really sink yourself into it because you've got to pay too much of attention to the road.
Yeah.
So it is really dead time. Now, you've been creating some really nice content, and you're creating some content here to help people escape the 9 to 5. So if you could talk us through your website here and let us know what you've got here for our friends today in terms of what they can steal from your website.
Yeah, definitely.
So they can escape the 9 to 5. So what do you have here for our viewers today? And I'm going to, ladies and gentlemen, I'll put up the link in the chat box, and so you can go and get these giveaways immediately.
Yeah, so I've got a masterclass where I literally just share a little bit more about my story, how I've gone from being broken, and to now living the life of my dreams. One of the other things that I've created is also, how to create your ideal day. And that really was one of the turning points for me as well, because I needed to really think about what I wanted my day to look like. And it wasn't just about, where I was going to be. It was also the people I wanted to be surrounded by as well. So I've created a worksheet for you to really to discover and create it. And a lot of times that's also going to help you work out where you want to go. So it may be that you still want to stay in the corporate world, but you actually want to shift to a different career. You might be working in an office, but you want to work outside. So it really gets those creative juices flowing. I have fallen in love with spirituality, and journal writing for me has been, a good release to sort of get everything out of my mind and onto paper. And I've created just 14 days worth of journal prompts, because a lot of people just do not know what to even start, what questions to ask. And for those who are sitting there going, I've got a side hustle, don't know whether or not I want to, step into it, but, what is some of the fundamentals? And one of the big things that I've learned with starting my business is that you need to know your client. So I've created a document of how to create your client avatar. It literally is going to take you through so that you know your ideal client like you know your best friend.
I love it. I was just thinking about the diary then, and the ones that I used to write at school. Dear diary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think I've got a crush on her and her and her. I'd love to find that diary. Diarising is really good. I was doing this recently as a task from my coach. She said, Daniel, I want you to track your daily activities, what you do in the morning, what you do during the day, hour for hour, what you do all the way through till night. And within the first day, I looked at what was in the diary. I went, fuck me dead. I
Mhm.
said, shit. And I looked there
Yeah.
and I was just putting so much bad
Yeah.
stuff into my body. Now, I thought I was being quite healthy, but we eat out a lot here in Taiwan. It's just easier and we can get fresh food. And I'd prefer to work an extra hour than my wife doing 2 hours of preparation,
Mhm.
cooking and cleaning. And so we work a little bit harder and we have these options. But I'd go out and I'd have a can of Coke at dinner time. Then I'd come home and I'd have a can of beer. And then the next morning I'd have about 3 coffees. And I started to look at all this sugar I'm putting in my body. And so that came up and I went in the diarising and I went, well, I'm going to stop drinking the Coke. I'm going to stop drinking the beer. And then I looked, I'm eating soy. Okay, I'm going to stop eating soy like tofu. Then I'm having 2 slices of bread with peanut butter in the morning. I said, well, I'm going to stop eating bread and peanut butter. And then I stopped eating bread and little cakes with dinner. And within just 4 weeks, I'd stopped all that together. I didn't have to set a goal. I just stopped it immediately. Decision
Mm.
was made because I saw it in front of me. And the
Yeah.
diary revealed to me my behaviours, the ones that were helpful, but also the
Yeah.
ones that were hurtful. And if you haven't diarised for a while, ladies and gentlemen, I really recommend that do it for 14 days. And what will happen is you'll bring up to the surface all your strengths and all those things that you're doing well.
Mm.
But you can also see where you're wasting your time. And I'll tell you what, I pride myself on my time management, but gee, I was wasting a lot of time on things that were
Yeah.
just not important whatsoever. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you head over there and download it. I'll put the link here in the chat box now and you can do that.
Beautiful.
Now, for people who are thinking about escaping, what was the biggest mental block for you, Christine? What was the mental or emotional block that prevented you from getting out earlier?
Failure. That really was just that word that just kept coming up to me, like, oh, I'm going to fail, because there was, well, what I thought was an expectation on me of what, society thought, what I'd been brought up to believe. So it really was sort of letting go of that and, just sort of sinking into it. I believe that the universe gave me a good kick up the backside and made me sick for a particular reason, just to sort of let me see that, there's something more out there. But yeah, just that word failure just sits there sometimes and you're just like, oh, I don't want to fail. And yeah, so that stopped me probably leaving a lot earlier.
And for our friends who are having the same emotional block, for our friends who are fearing failure, and failure is their obstacle and they're not doing what they want because they have that same fear as you had in the past, knowing what you now know, what advice would you share with them?
I would first of all, I think sometimes we need to have a conversation with ourselves, and if like failure comes up, or you think, oh, why is this happening to us? We actually have to sometimes talk to ourselves, going, well, where did that come from, and actually find out what it was. And sometimes what it is an old story or something that we've been told in our childhood, and we know that it no longer exists, like it's not serving us a purpose anymore. So we really, it might sound a little bit crazy, but sometimes just having a conversation with yourself and just thinking, where did that come from? Why am I actually feeling that? Is that just me, or will other people think the same?
Amanda, thank you for your contribution there. We are our own worst critics. It's so true. And Christine, as you're mentioning here, the stories we're being told, when I was growing up, I remember my parents telling me and my brother that when mum and dad got married, it was in the 70s. They were newlyweds. They moved from Sydney. They went up to Singleton and they lived in a place called Broke. And they eventually went broke because the farming industry declined. And so they had to move from the country back to the city. Dad couldn't be a farmer anymore, so he drove a bus, he drove a taxi, and he had to slog it out working for somebody else. And so then you hear all these fear-based stories. Your dad and I, we put everything in the farm, and then we just lost it all, and we had to come back and get a job. Now, thanks to my parents, they kept pursuing their dreams, and they didn't give up hope. But there'd be a lot of people in that same situation where people make limiting decisions and say, I'll never do that again. And then for the rest of their life, they breed it into their children. Don't do business, it's too risky. Just get a job.
Yeah.
Do your 40 hours, do your 40 years, get the gold watch after 20 years, get 4 lots of long service leave, and then go to Europe on a holiday.
Yep.
When I was cabin crew, they used to call this the death flights because they'd say, all these Aussies, they've been cooped up in Australia for 40 years, and then they go on a holiday after they retire and they die on the flight.
Yeah.
It was true.
Yeah.
They die because they just didn't do what they wanted. But I think a lot of people die on the inside corporate jobs. They don't pursue their potentials.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a shame.
It's,
but
it is, yeah.
there's so many benefits there. My wife and I, we were both cabin crew with Emirates Airline. And we would laugh and say Emirates Airline was like having the champagne lifestyle on the lemonade wage. So we worked for a multi-billion-dollar intercontinental business, would fly around the world, but was at the cost of our dreams. And so we worked for somebody else. We had a great time. We achieved our goals. But at the end of the day, you walked away with nothing. And a lot of our friends at the moment, they've lost their jobs. There was 25,000 cabin crew. They just recently fired 7,000. And all of our friends are back to square one. But there's nothing that they can take with them. It all belongs to the company. Yes, they get their experience. Yes, they get their memories. But they've got to start again. And so if you're thinking about starting a business, make sure you head over to the corporateescapeartist.com and get your free resources. Christine, thank you so much. Now, we've got a podcast coming up in a couple of weeks from now, so I'm excited to be swapping roles.
Yes, it's been nice. Thank you.
Now, your final thoughts and wisdom with our friends on those who are thinking about escaping the 9 to 5, your final thoughts to share with them.
Just do it. Life's too short. And if you ask yourself, if not now, when? And most of the time, it will never be anything. You'll want everything to be all perfect, everything all lined up, but there's never a perfect time to do it. Sometimes you just got to take the leap of faith and bet on yourself.
Well said. And I'm going to clap on their behalf because they'll love it. Well, Christine, thank you so much for sharing your time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're being joined by Christine Innes today from the corporateescapeartist.com. Head over there and get your freebies today. Christine, thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Taiwan time, 6 p.m. Sydney. Have a wonderful